it is what I'm going to talk about is the way in which the legal profession is having to change at the moment. So that's my plan. If I'm speaking too quickly, then please put your hand up and tell me. Was that a yes? I'm speaking too quickly already. And if I say something that you really don't understand, then I'm happy to take a question as we go along, although I would encourage you to hold questions to the end. But if you do feel that what I'm talking about is completely incomprehensible, then we'd better sort that out so that we are able to move on. Okay, so in considering how technology is changing the world of work, we can't disassociate it from all the other things that are going on. And it's the case that we're living in a very turbulent world. So identifying cause and effect and what technology is driving rather than technology enabling is difficult. So I'll start just by talking about some of the things that are affecting businesses and will, of course, affect education and teaching. Then I'm going to look at the legal profession in particular. There were two reasons for doing this. The first is that BPP University has a law school and we train a lot of lawyers. But secondly, it's a profession that is undergoing huge change at the moment because, like teaching and education, the legal profession have resisted the use of technology for some considerable time, and now they're having to do it in a considerable hurry. And I'll finish by looking ahead at what I think are some very significant dilemmas about the way in which technology will continue to change the way that we work, that you will have to address in the course of your careers. So that's the plan. So let's start with this turbulent world. Globalization, financial crisis, rapidly changing technology, the growth of China. There are many forces acting on business at the moment, and that's causing profound change in the way businesses operate and in the models that they're using to be successful. You may be, I'm sure you are familiar with Nokia as the leading company in the production of mobile phones. Well, Nokia have completely lost that lead and are nowhere in mobile phones because they misjudged the way in which technology would advance, and they missed the boat completely with the smartphone. Microsoft pretty much did the same. They didn't see mobile phones coming. They didn't see tablets. They actually, maybe foolishly, have bought Nokia's mobile phone business and are trying to catch up with the technology, but they are so far behind, it's difficult to see how they will manage that, particularly given the sort of competition that is now coming from China in the production of mobile phones and from Google in the Android system. Tesco is perhaps a name that you're not familiar with. It's one of the UK's leading supermarkets. And it is going through a profit crisis at the moment because the habits of consumers have changed in the UK. Once upon a time, not so long ago, the typical pattern for grocery shopping in the UK was that you would go to the supermarket once a week, buy all your food for the week, put it in the boot of your car and drive it home. And it was a very predictable, stable pattern of the way consumers were buying. And yet over the last few years, there have been massive changes in the way consumers are behaving. They're spreading their shopping around, they're using discount shops, they're using online. And Tesco is in crisis because again, it failed to anticipate the way in which technology would disrupt their market. When I first wrote the title of this course, my thought was to talk in general terms about knowledge workers, but the more I worked on that, the more I realized how hard that was, not least because in many organizations, everyone is a knowledge worker, whether they're working with tacit knowledge related to the physical production of product or service, or they're working with academic and theoretical skills. Many people are knowledge workers. So in order to get around that and make my life more manageable, what I'm going to talk about is just the legal profession and the way in which technology is affecting that. In London, we have a number of highly successful law firms. The top firms are known as the magic circle because they produce such extraordinary profits No one is quite sure how they do it. It's almost as if it's were magic. Actually, the way they do it is that they take on the most complex, large-scale and challenging legal work, whether in mergers and acquisitions or in complex disputes. They hire the best and brightest lawyers. They have a rigorous development and professional development process. And it leads to being able to perform at the highest level of capability in legal work. And a good number of BPP's students work for these firms. And indeed, Clifford Chance is one of the firms that we have a particular relationship with. So these firms make huge profits and are very successful, and yet they are not immune from these changes in the turbulent world. And then sitting beneath them are a number of law firms that do slightly less complex, slightly less profitable work, through to a whole tier of legal practitioners doing the trivial and the routine. If we consider the challenges that are facing these firms, then first of all, they're facing new competition. Law is going global. So new firms are entering the London market and competing with the established firms. They in turn are trying to figure out how to operate globally because they have client organizations that operate globally and they need to have a presence in the US, in Europe, in Africa, and in Asia. And so they need to grow their businesses to match their clients. And they have to make a choice about how they do that. Do they do it by acquisitions? Do they buy another law firm in Asia? Do they enter into some kind of best friends arrangement and share their clients? They're also having to change the way their business works in terms of the use of technology, where work is done, how work is done, largely because they're under huge pressure on price. Law firms used to get business through a very cozy relationship. The head legal counsel of a large organization would have a relationship with a partner in the firm, they'd have lunch together, they'd have dinner together, and winning business was based on that relationship. The arrival of professional buying skills has put that relationship completely in jeopardy, and now the expectation is that each firm will have to compete for the right to do a piece of work, will have to provide a competitive price, which is what happens in every area of business. We use competition to drive value and price, and we expect competition to yield business benefits for us. So the law firms are being exposed to what actually is normal business practice. But that's painful for them because they've gone for a long time never having to sell themselves. So dealing with professional buying and then creating a culture where they have people that recognize and understand how to sell their services is a new departure. And by the way, actually these firms all pretty much act and look the same. It's a lot of people in smart business suits who have law degrees and do clever things with the law, but they look and behave in a very similar way. So it's hard to discriminate about the level of value that they are able to deliver. There's also a particular global threat, which is where lawyers are being trained and developed. So in the UK, we have about 120,000 business lawyers. That sounds like an awful lot. But if you go to India, India is trying to train nearly that number of lawyers every year. And China has huge ambitions for training lawyers to work in China and elsewhere. These are very bright, very capable people. And although legal systems differ around the world, it is quite feasible to move legal work from the UK to India or from the UK to other regions, provided you train the lawyers to understand the particular nuances of a country's legal system. And the unit labour costs are the key thing. An Indian lawyer is considerably cheaper than a lawyer sitting in the City of London. In the last firm that I worked for, it was a consulting firm, and we were offering legal services, and the proposition was very simple. We would provide a management service for complex outsourcing contracts using a team of lawyers that we'd recruited in India. Not only were they much cheaper, typically, than the firm's own lawyers, but they were much better. And through the process and their understanding of outsourcing, they were able to save money not just on the cost of the work, but also by doing it better and more effectively than typically the resources doing it that we took on the work from. So if we want to summarize this, then the firms themselves have got to make some strategic choice about how and where they compete, which markets, what type of legal services, which part of the world. They need to figure out how they are able to compete. You win business by being better than the other firm, well, they have to find ways to stand out and to win business. And they need to exploit technology much more effectively than they are today. Which, in short, is they do need to do a lot more for a lot less and a lot quicker, rather like the hamster on the wheel being made to run ever faster. This is an uncomfortable place for these firms because that is not the environment in which they've had to work. So if we look in at the specifics of how technology is changing the way people work, then there's a range of areas, and I'll go through each of them in turn. We divide up the labour, we can automate, we can relocate. And as a consequence of doing that, it is having quite profound effects on the way in which people's careers will unfold in the future. The legal career of the past will not occur in the future because the way of working is so different. So the young lawyers that are leaving our law school at BPP this September to start their training contracts in the big London law firms will see a very different working environment to the ones that their predecessors experienced. So we start with division of labour. If you have someone who is very expert, it makes no sense to have that person doing work that doesn't require that expertise. If they're managing, if they're doing routine analysis or research, or they're doing some other task that doesn't require that expertise, that is a waste of their time and value for the organisation. So give that work to someone else and keep them focused on the work that they do best. And so we hand off the work to other people, and we use technology to enable the communication and the working between the expert and the people that are supporting them. The next thing, of course, is to use technology just to make things go quicker, whether that's storing and retrieving documents, accessing knowledge, search systems. We can use technology to make things better and faster and easier to do. I'm sure all of you are using technology in your studies, and the ability to find things out now is so very rapid. I taught a class of MBA students the week before last. All of them are very bright graduates about to start a training contract with a London law firm. And all of them sat in my class with their laptops open, taking their notes. And if they didn't understand what I said, they'd Google it. And then they wouldn't ask me a basic question, they'd ask me the follow-on question based on what they'd learnt on Google. So accessing information for experts is suddenly very easy. And actually, if you're going to teach, if you have technology-enabled students, you have to figure out what is the strategy you're going to adopt for dealing with the question that someone just Googled and used all the resources of the internet to pose for you. Well, that may be not the question that you're necessarily equipped to deal with. And then the next thing we can do with technology is to move work. This is the campus of an Indian firm called Zenza Technologies. It provides software development services, and services are provided largely to companies in the UK, the US, and across Europe. So it carries out software development on behalf of organisations using resources that cost from a sixth to a quarter that they would cost if they were based in the countries in which they're providing the services to. We can put these three things together: the division of work, the use of technology, and relocation, and create centralized activities. So here's a very simple model of a business, and let's say that the blue boxes represent the financial function. So each business serving a different customer and market has some accountants that do the work to help them keep score, to keep track of the numbers. And then there's a central accounting function that's operating for the whole of the business. What you would find if you looked in each of those individual units is that they'd be doing pretty much the same thing, but they'd be doing it slightly differently, maybe with different systems, and maybe not particularly cleverly. If we take all of the routine work and put it in one place, we can use technology to make it more effective, we get more productive work from the people, and what we leave in the business is just the expert work that needs to be done face-to-face and through a relationship. And so suddenly we have the capability to move work wherever we can, wherever we want to, because it doesn't matter where this is done. It can be done anywhere. It can be in the building next door, or it can be in Bangalore in India, because technology will bridge that gap. This has been a process that's been going on for the last 10 or 15 years in business. In fact, we were at a meeting this morning talking about the way in which the British Embassy is going to process visa applications for students coming to the UK. And previously they had 4 or 5 locations in North and South America, and they've basically collapsed it down to Bogota is now the center for processing visa applications for Central and South America, and New York is the center for North America. And they've done exactly this. They've combined the work into one location, they apply technology to it, they make it more productive, and so instead of processing small amounts of visas in different places, they're going to centralize it and put it all in one place. The law firms are having to do this now. They've suddenly woken up to the fact that if they're to control their costs, they need to start moving their work around. So most of the big London law firms have created these centers and put their accounting and their HR and their IT people in them, but they're also putting legal work into those locations. And at the moment, they're being very cautious. They're using other parts of the United Kingdom that are slightly lower cost, and it costs less money for office space and less money to hire staff. The next step will be they'll start to look further abroad. These are pictures of 2 of the big law firm centres. One is in Scotland, one in Ireland. Nice, smart offices, nice environments to work in, but distanced from the central activity of the firm and the relationships with clients. Because in these offices, what we're doing is the routine transactional legal work that supports the work of the partners and the people that have the deep expert in legal work. So if you go to work in one of these, instead of working on a day-to-day basis with some of the best legal minds in the firm and having direct contact and exposure to them, you're stuck in a building a long way away, processing stuff at arm's length and not necessarily having a full understanding of what you're being asked to do. You're reading documents, you're marking them up, you're annotating, but you're not getting the contact, which profoundly changes the relationship between entry-level lawyers and the rest of the firm. And in fact, what they're starting to do is use paralegals, people that are not fully qualified lawyers, but understand enough about the law to do the routine work. I'm sure you're familiar with eBay and the other kind of online auctions. Well, online auctions are being used to make professional services more efficient. This application, CabMania, is for getting a taxi in London, and you can put in a requirement for a taxi journey and you get a quote and you can choose the best price. Click 4 Legal is a system that Deutsche Bank, the big investment bank, has installed, where when it wants legal work doing now, it posts on Click 4 Legal the requirements, and then it holds what's called a reverse auction. So it invites law firms to bid for the work, and they can see each other's bids, and they compete to see who's willing to bid the lowest amount of money to do that work. So suddenly we've got intense pressure on the price. There's no longer that cozy relationship between the counsel and the law firm partner over lunch. Instead, we have an online auction driving price down, which is an uncomfortable experience when you haven't encountered it before. And there are other marketplaces that seek to broker the relationship between lawyers and clients. So here, this is a website designed to allow firms to post requirements for legal work and to take bids from potential firms to do the work. And what they're seeking for, of course, is value. And when they've had the work done for them, like so many other of these sites, they rate the performance of the individuals that perform the work and of the firm. So they build up a reputation based on how well they perform on a day-to-day basis. This is also creating new networks and ways of collaborating and finding business. How many of you are familiar with LinkedIn? How many of you are familiar with a network called LinkedIn? One person? Two. Okay. As you progress in your career, you'll find LinkedIn a great way to connect and build professional relationships. It's a Facebook for professionals, if you like. It enables people to connect, to form connections, and to communicate around business issues. And that's been around now for some years. The Yammer is what's called enterprise social networking. This is Facebook for businesses. So it's a social networking tool to be used internally within a firm, and it enables people in a global firm to build relationships using a social technology, which have huge benefits when it comes to building knowledge and knowing who to ask. The key to success in a big organization is typically not what you know, but who you know and who is willing to share their knowledge and expertise with you. Well, Yammer and LinkedIn are both tools for helping you build relationships that will enable you to get help when you need it. The last relationship, Legal on Ramp, allows law firm clients to talk to each other and exchange ideas. So this is the buyers of legal services talking about the law firms and comparing notes. So suddenly they're assessing the value of the services, who's good, who isn't good, which adds to the pressure on the law firms to perform and to deliver value to their clients. This is also creating new ways of designing the law firm. The traditional law firm is a hierarchy. At the top is a managing partner who's in charge. There's a group of partners, and then progressively junior lawyers. And you enter the law firm at the bottom as a graduate. You complete a training process and you progress either up the firm or out of the firm until you arrive at the top of the hierarchy. That's the old model, and that model is disappearing to something that looks like this. Fewer partners at the top, more people in the middle, and then a big bunch of people in those back offices or outsourced or doing the routine work who aren't part of the progression to partner, but are supporting the work of the firm. That means a requirement to manage a different sort of people with different rewards and to work in a very different way. And creates not necessarily particularly attractive roles for those that are in here, because their chance of progressing into this area of the firm are much lower. I suspect at the back of the room you can't see at all. This is a graph that shows the profit per partner. So one of the measures of a law firm's success is how much profit do the partners make. The partners are the owners of the firm, and a firm may have several hundred partners. So this is the number of partners. Allen & Overy, one of those big Magic Circle firms, nearly 500 partners. And those partners are making nearly £1 million of profit every year. That's £1 million that goes into their pocket, right? So each year, they're generating a very, very substantial profit within the firm. And this is typically the measure that is used to assess the success of the London law firms. And what's happening is the bigger firms are actually getting bigger and more profitable, but the ones that are doing the next level of work down are under intense pressure to find ways to improve their profitability and be more successful. And they're particularly struggling as to where and how should we compete, what work do we do, how do we find a way to differentiate ourselves from the other firms in the marketplace. Up to now, I've only really been talking about the way in which an individual firm is being affected. But of course, law firms exist within a system, and the place where legal firms come together is in the courts. In 1993, in Williamsburg, in Virginia, a thing called Courtroom 21 was set up to experiment with the way in which technology could be used within a courtroom. Courtrooms are intensely conservative organizations. They are using processes and technologies that haven't changed for 200 years in the UK. A judge of 100 years ago would not be surprised at some of the workings of a court today. And I went to what's now the Centre for Legal Technology in 1997 with a group of senior judges from the London courts. And we spent 3 days talking about how we could use technology in the courtroom to improve the speed of trials. And to give you some idea of that, if you're conducting a very complex trial with many items of evidence, if you use very simple display technology, you can reduce the time for the trial by 30 to 50%. So there are really big savings to be made in the courtroom process if you can introduce technology. And I came back from that meeting thinking, those 3 days thinking, well, in the next 5 years, we will see courtrooms across the UK adopting technology because the benefits are so manifestly great. Why wouldn't you do it? This is technology that was easy and accessible and being widely used, so why wouldn't it get adopted? Well, I should have known better. Sometime before that, I'd listened to a discussion by Gary Hamill, who's a professor at the London Business School, about the way in which the internet would be adopted. And he said this: we tend to overestimate the speed of technology adoption, and we underestimate the impact. We overestimate the speed of adoption, we underestimate the impact. And you can see that with the way in which the internet has taken a long time to begin to really change business. Now, the internet started in 1996. We didn't see Amazon beginning to make significant sales until about 2005. Facebook really got going in 2005. So it's been a relatively long time coming. And it's only today that we're really seeing, I think, the big impacts of the internet through our access through mobile devices, our willingness to shop online, and so on. It's taken a long time. And I was horribly wrong about the speed at which courts would adopt technology. The judges themselves are conservative by nature. And when you have expert people dealing complicated work, which have many options for performing the work, it's very hard to get agreement on just how it should be done. And that was the problem with the systems within the courtroom, getting agreement that the changes could be made. Would all of the judges agree to have the technology? Would prosecutors be comfortable? Would defense counsel be comfortable with it? So it's only now planned that by the end of next year, we will have courtroom technology. And this is really simple technology. This is Wi-Fi, okay? So that the lawyers in the room can actually access documents and material that they haven't brought into the courtroom. The UK court system uses something like 160 million pieces of paper every year in administering justice. Well, if we could use electronic documents, we would transform the way that that works. Digital evidence screens. That's actually just, let's have a screen and present our evidence on the screen so people can see it, rather than having a big bundle of papers and saying to the juror and to the defendant, turn to page 23 of your bundle and look at the document on page 23. Instead, we put it straight onto a screen. It speeds up the process of justice enormously. And there's a lot of other technology investment going on to just get rid of all of that paper stuff. This has taken 20 years. This is not difficult technology to use. Well, it is if actually, if you're a senior judge, it is difficult technology because you're not familiar with it. But to the next generation of lawyers coming into the system, this is easy technology. It's what we would expect as the norm in terms of being able to make ourselves productive and have access to information and to be able to display documents. All of this that I've talked about is stuff that's happened. It's observable. We've transformed the way financial accounting, human resource management, procurement, information systems. We've automated it, we've relocated it, we've split it up, we've made it more efficient, we've done all of that. And we're doing it to the law firms now. And they're not enjoying it, but it will happen and it will work through the system. The big challenge for all of you is what's coming next. Because what's coming next is a very different set of technologies that will profoundly change the work of knowledge workers. Does anyone know does anyone play Scrabble? Has Scrabble reached Columbia? Yes, okay, good. And backgammon, I guess. And are we familiar with Jeopardy, the trivial quiz game? Okay, so what do these three games have in common? Does anyone know? Yeah, the board games and table games, that's true. They have that in common. What else do they have in common? Sorry? Okay, I think we're looking up the word. Yeah, okay, no. No, the answer is that there are computers that are far better than humans at playing them. You would lose to a computer, the right computer. But there are computers that beat the best human players consistently, even at trivial quizzes, okay? And this is artificial intelligence, which is with us now and is only going to get more pervasive. Actually, what happens with artificial intelligence is that it gets adopted and we call it software. So Siri on your iPhone or the Genius recommendations on your iTunes, that's artificial intelligence. It's observing patterns in what you do, it's recognizing speech, and it's offering you suggestions. And we can see artificial intelligence being used in face recognition, in speech recognition, in analyzing documents. But this is only just the beginning of what artificial intelligence is going to do to knowledge workers. In the legal process area, they're already using machine intelligence to read documents. So with machine intelligence, we can read natural language. We can read a document and we can train the artificial intelligence system to recognize words and phrases and to understand and get better progressively at it. Which means if you have to analyze a large quantity of documents in a legal situation to identify particular phrases or clauses, then you can use this kind of technology. This is precisely the sort of work that is currently being doing by those paralegals and those junior lawyers in those back offices that the big law firms have been creating. Because once you've created a transaction-based back office or a shared service center, well, the next step is that you can outsource it, and then finally you can make it completely automatic. In the world of IT systems, there's a lot of interest in what is called robotic process automation, using clever artificial intelligence systems to manage the complexities of IT systems. We're just at the beginning of this. If you want to learn more, then I'd suggest go and look at the IBM Watson site. There's a really good video on there that explains artificial intelligence and explains how it works. The key bits of it are, first of all, this ability to read natural language and genuinely understand it. The next is the ability to learn, so we can train an expert system. And then finally, to work and generate hypotheses. So Watson is being used to find cures for cancer. It's being used in legal work. It's being used to augment the work of experts. And it's only just at its early stages. And it's a very good game player, of course. I think it was Watson that won the Jeopardy competition, which is the trivia quiz. Okay, so artificial intelligence is coming. No, wrong. Artificial intelligence is here, and it's going to do more and more. In the UK, we've just made it legal for driverless vehicles to operate on our road. Driverless vehicle technology is based around artificial intelligence. There are significant limitations at the moment in terms of the quality of the sensors and the way in which the technology works, but you would expect that to get progressively better and for us to see increasing numbers of driverless vehicles. There are big potential for these vehicles in things like mining and in farm work. So there are mines that operate in Australia where all of the dump trucks that are taking ore from the mine up to the smelting plant are driverless. And the driverless vehicles don't get tired, they're more fuel efficient, they don't have accidents, they keep going through the night, and they don't produce as much wear and tear on the vehicles. They are, in all respects, better than having a human operator. And you can see the same potential in farm work, driverless farm vehicles. Did you realize it's possible to milk a cow without human intervention? Pretty common in Europe to have automated milking systems where the cow, when it's ready to be milked, walks into a robotic milking machine, and the milking machine cleans the cow, attaches the milking apparatus, recognizes which cow it is, gives them the appropriate diet, milks the cow feeds, and happily walks on their way. And there is no involvement from a human being at all, other than to check the programming of the robotic milking machine. So we cut out a huge amount of human layer, and we can see this coming, robotic use on the farm becoming more and more extensive. So what about this thing, human-level machine intelligence? Artificial intelligence that is as good as you and me at doing a professional task. Well, this is from a table from a new book by a guy called Nick Bostrom, who's an academic at Oxford University. He's actually a philosopher, and his book is largely about the social implications of this sort of technology, because this has the potential to radically destroy work. And he did a survey of people that are expert in artificial intelligence and working on how do we develop artificial intelligence. And you can see the range of data. So 2022, there's a 10% probability of having human-level machine intelligence. 27.5 and 90% certainty. Now, this, of course, is a forecast. And remember what I said about we overestimate the speed at which we might adopt technology, and we underestimate the impact. Well, we may be very much overestimating how quickly this will occur, and it may be that we're not talking about 27.5, but we're talking about something 50 years beyond. Whatever this date, what is clear is that over the next decades, we will see more and more artificial intelligence systems being available, competing for some of the work that you and I will be doing. And it's not just you and I. This is a robotic pharmacy system. So what it does, it dispenses drugs. It does away with a nice man who takes your prescription from the doctor and gets the right medicines and gives it to you. It does it entirely automatically. So we eliminate the need for a pharmacist, other than to have someone to have a conversation with while we're waiting for the robot to do their stuff, and maybe someone to give us some advice about the best thing for our sore throat, because we haven't got a prescription for that. So whether it's people in the legal profession or the medical profession or in pharmacy, robotics and artificial intelligence are here and coming. Our business school in London is right in the centre of the financial district. And when I walk to work in the morning, I go past any number of cranes and building sites because the city is constantly changing. Old buildings are being knocked down, new buildings are being built. It changes all the time. And a long time ago, my first job in the technology industry, I wanted a course on how to sell. And the key message of that course was, change is opportunity. And technology keeps changing, and it always generates opportunities, but it generates winners and losers. I think the challenging thing with artificial intelligence is that there are observers who are beginning to say, actually, we may be entering a period where technology doesn't create jobs, it starts to destroy them. But the past technologies, although we've made things more efficient, and we've relocated, and we've done all that clever stuff to make ourselves more productive, hasn't destroyed work at all. But there is the potential in these new technologies, robotics, artificial intelligence, to do that. And we face choices over the extent to which we allow them to be adopted and the extent to which they become all-pervasive. So to that degree, I want to add a question mark to change this opportunity, because it may not be such an opportunity going forward. And that's why I said, this is what you're going to have to wrestle with. Because actually, in 5 years' time, I'm going to be on a beach, enjoying myself, and not worrying quite so much about my professional career, because I'm coming to the end of that. But for you, this is the stuff that's going to be going on through your lifetime, and you need to think about it. It's a shame there are no philosophers in the audience, because I think we need philosophers to help us with this particular question. And if you doubt me, then there are some very influential people saying, hey, we need to really think about what is going on and the implications of these changes that are coming, because they may well not be such a good thing for all of us. And Bill Gates is one, Professor Stephen Hawking is another that's been in the news recently in the UK, the guy that is, his name escapes me, who runs the Tesla car corporation in the US. All have begun to say, look, we need to think seriously about the way in which artificial intelligence is going to start to impact on knowledge workers and on professionals. Okay, well, I'm done with my talking bit, so I'm more than happy to answer questions. I hope that wasn't too quick or too English for those of you that are less fluent than I am. I regret to say I could not have done it in Spanish. Questions? Okay.
Well, so you are invited to chit-chat, talk to one another, and come up with a couple of questions that some of you might be interested. How do you see, what did you get from the conference? So please talk to the person sitting next to you, and then we'll open the room for questions. Daniel. Invitamos a los de es el 90%. Y un 10% y un 20%. So, yes, something that I would like, before your question, I'd like to give you a little bit of a wrap up of what I understood in the lecture, and then invite you with the questions. In the sense that we consider that information technologies especially have changed many things, and the generation that we have in front of us, they have lived the changes like very naturally, right? But older generations have been a little bit of a shock, a little bit more disruptive. And in your presentation, it was very interesting to see that we generally associate technologies with entertainment, we associate technologies with farming and all that. But you made us understand how important it was that actually what is changing through technologies are the markets. So the way we get things, either services from lawyers, or bidding or auction for contracts of any kind, or for offering any sort of professional services, they are also being transformed by technologies. That's what I gather from that conference. So will you please speak loud, and I'll be happy to rephrase what you said. Yes, Richard. Daniel.
How many of you have heard of edX? 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 Yeah, it's a joint. edX is a joint venture between Harvard and MIT, and it runs what are called MOOCs. Does anyone try to MOOC? Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to do a MOOC. A MOOC is a massive open online course. So these are free university-level courses provided by edX. So I'm doing a MOOC at the moment on complex systems. I'm really interested in how you deal with complex systems in business. So I'm listening to a course that was run by the University of Delft. It's a series of videos and exercises. There's a textbook, and I could get a certificate if I finished it. I'm just listening to lectures. But the key thing that's going on with edX and with MOOCs is a big experiment on how do you deliver education globally at a much lower cost than we do today. Because if you think about the number of people in India and in China, in Africa, who are and in South America, who are hungry for a high-quality university education, yet don't have the means to pay the sort of fees that we have in these bricks and mortars universities, whether in the City of London or here. The route to delivering that is going to be online. We don't know enough about the teaching and the educational experience of online courses, particularly at undergraduate and postgraduate level, to be confident in the way that we do this. I teach on a wholly online undergraduate course. It's the first time we've run it, and we only have 5 students. So we're kind of figuring out the way in which people learn, because they're part-time learners with jobs, and the way in which we can deliver the most effective content to them. Now, do you deliver a 20-minute, 40-minute video lecture, or is it better to do lots of little videos and go with people's short attention span? What sort of readings are most effective? So, and edX is doing that experiment. The really interesting thing, I think, for teachers is how do we figure out how to get marking automated? I don't know, does anyone mark here? Marking is the nightmare of education as far as I'm concerned. You do this really good thing, you teach and you see people learning and you have great conversations with students, and then they go and then all of them go away and write 2,500 words that you have to mark. And you're beginning to lose the will to live after the first 50 papers. And when you get to 100, yeah, you see, you understand this. When you get to 120, you're suicidal. Well, sometimes. Sometimes you're delighted. I always learn from marking. What I understand from edX is one of the key things that they're investigating is how do we run assessments more effectively, particularly assessments in a world where practically anything is accessible. You know, I mean, if you're writing a paper on a particular topic, it's not like you have to go down the library and look at physical books. It's all there online and you have access to it and you can assemble an argument relatively quickly. So edX is about learning how to do this stuff online. And I think, you know, our intent at BPP is to put all of our courses online as quickly as possible, because our expectation is that our professional education has huge value in places like India and China for people who want to study the law and to be able to do legal work potentially for UK clients. So my advice to you would be, do a MOOC and think really hard about these questions of how you could use technology in the teaching that you're going to practice and the assessments that you're going to practice and ways of reinforcing learning. You know, students, as you know, are very motivated by the assessment process. And so the skill which we apply to designing good assessments is fundamental to driving the learning goals of the students. So I think that's the place you need to explore, because if you don't do it, then Harvard and MIT and BPP will work out how to do this, and we'll work out how to do it globally, and we'll put all our stuff in Spanish. But that's what's going to happen.
All right. Para aquellos que hayan tal vez perdido parte de la sutileza de la respuesta, hay una analogía muy interesante. Así como el profesor Daniel Jones nos explicó que todos los trabajos están cambiando y que el cambio, somos muy optimistas frente a la velocidad del cambio y somos como muy pesimistas frente al impacto que se tiene. De igual modo en la educación, en el ejemplo que acaba de darnos, existen ya cursos en línea de excelente calidad, hechos por las más prestigiosas universidades del mundo. Sin embargo, la educación es muy conservadora y tú tienes la competencia adquirida en ese curso, pero no te la validan porque fue en línea. Y el curso tal vez haya sido tan difícil o más difícil que el que tomas presencialmente. Entonces, ese ejemplo que nos da ratifica. I'm telling them that we are very conservative in the sense of education, because in spite of how good those courses are, people will not validate them. You didn't go to the brick university, you didn't go to the real university, but you did it online, so people just don't believe you were able to develop the competence. La otra parte que comentó el profesor Daniel Jones tiene que ver con la evaluación. La evaluación es muy importante y todos gozamos con la interacción en la clase, con estar con los estudiantes, pero sufrimos cuando tenemos que calificar. Marking. Y hoy en día ya hay muchos otros sistemas para calificar de manera confiable, de manera que sea bastante válida, pero siempre tenemos como todas las dificultades para vender la idea de un objective marking. ¿Otras preguntas o comentarios respecto a la conferencia? Please. Monsieur Gutiérrez, s'il te plaît. Oui, tu nombre y cuéntanos. Communicative skills, how does it affect communicative skills of the professionals in training?
That's a great question. One of the issues in the courtroom technology was the concern that if you were to have a witness not in the courtroom, but displaying a video link and showing them on a screen, that you would miss the nuances of their behavior and so on. I think people are coming to the view that the quality of the video links that we can now create are such that that isn't an issue. If you practice, you can achieve a great deal, even just with a simple voice connection. One of the things I do outside the university is that I work with business managers and owners to coach them. And when I do coaching, I do it entirely on the phone. But if I listen really hard, I can tell their emotional state. I can pretty well I can feel the body language just by listening to their voice. So if we practice, we can get much better with these communication technologies. And when I observe your generation, I see great ability to communicate very effectively using a range of technologies and be very comfortable with it. So I think it's harder for those people that haven't grown up with the technology. But generally speaking, I think that's not a huge limitation. I think there's some big questions still around the effective way to teach and